Also with that building in Detroit, when Prabhupada, this is Deva Siddham Mandir, when Prabhupada walked through, he had no money at the time, for this particular project. He had no money. And it was a gorgeous, gorgeous building. In fact, we didn't know what to do with it. There was a painting in the front lobby of all these naked women bathing. So all the sannyasis, they were all, everyone trying to be proper about things. Prabhupada looked at it, turned to the man and said, very nicely done. Then they came to where there was a big polar bear rug, the kind with the head and the teeth and everything. So Srila Prabhupada looked at it and very gingerly took his cane, put the tip of his cane in the mouth and lifted up and looked at the teeth. And very wide-eyed like a child, he turned to Jagadish Maharaj and said, they eat men? And Jagadish Maharaj said, sometimes, Srila Prabhupada. So Prabhupada put it down and made a wide berth as he walked around the rug, and it was just very sublime. Prabhupada said at one point, the man was asking, I think, $1,000,000 something, or close to $1 million. Prabhupada said, every room is worth $1 million. In fact, it was even designed, there were 3 arches. They used to have the ballroom dancing, and they had where the orchestra was. There was 2 small arches and a large arch, just like we do for Jagannath, Radhakrishna, and Gaura Nitai. And even there were carved peacocks, there were lotuses, everything was carved, everything was designed. Prabhupada said, actually, this rich man, Krishna engaged him in building this building for us, and has simply been lying, waiting for us to come pick it up. So Prabhupada was had a vision for the building. So he walked through the whole thing, but just like he could pull the money out of his bead bag. Just, price wasn't even an issue, and Prabhupada was talking about this and that. So finally outside there's a sunken garden, and they were sitting in the grotto area, their nice sun, everything was very peaceful. And the man was a very greedy man. He was like a real money grubber guy. You could see the grease on his fingers, practically speaking. So when he sat down, and here was Srila Prabhupada, loved the building, and Prabhupada's, sublime aristocratic nature, that Prabhupada could just write the check. So Prabhupada said, this building is perfect for our purposes. Every room is exquisite. It's exactly what we want. He said, very aristocratic building. So the man was like, could taste the money. And Prabhupada turned to him and said, but we are not aristocrats. He said, we are professional beggars. Therefore, you should give it to us. And I thought the man was going to have a cardiac arrest, at the point he was like, ah, ah. So Prabhupada actually toyed with him. There's a whole story how Prabhupada toyed with him back and forth. And ultimately, Prabhupada got the building. The man actually tried to cheat us. After we got it, Ambarish gave half the money, I think, and then Lekha Shavanti, Lisa Ruther, gave half the money. And this way Prabhupada was able to, although he had nothing outside of his desire, and Krishna arranged the building and Prabhupada picked it up. And no one could believe the price Prabhupada got for it. In fact, we got a call from a neighbor that after the papers were signed, that the man was stripping the building. He was taking all the mirrors off the walls, all the doorknobs, all the fixtures, all the light, because everything was very opulent. He was stripping whatever he could. So we actually went and stopped him. He had one truck there. And we said, how can you do this? He said, I can't help it. He said, your Swami cheated me. So they told Prabhupada the story later on. That's when one of the times Prabhupada said, yes. Prabhupada said, I am a Calcutta boy. So he'd met his match with Srila Prabhupada. There was another.
I was living in Laguna Beach, and somehow or other, I had everything I needed in life. And if I'd stayed on course, I would have had the so-called American dream. Of course, now I know it's an American nightmare. But I would have had everything I wanted. Om Jaya Jagadishari, give me a new car and a house by the sea. I would have had it all. And yet, I could see all around me that people were not actually happy. As the poet says, all men lead lives of quiet desperation. So, I remember quite clearly, I was interested in Buddhism, but I thought the desire to become desireless is a self-centered desire. So that really didn't make sense. And as they say, better to have loved and lost than never to have loved at all. Better to have some kind of happiness and some kind of pleasure than just some kind of homogeneous home and om nothingness. So that really, Buddhism didn't really do it for me. And by Christian tradition, they had so many questions. If God is all good, why is someone born poor, someone born rich, someone with sight, If we only have one life, and if we don't surrender to Jesus, we burn forever in hell. That was the best God could come up with. There had to be more. Am I just chemicals? At the time of death, bury me under a fruit tree, at least I'll be good fertilizer. But the world seems to be working by order, design, pattern. Wherever there's order, design, pattern, there's intelligence behind it. So is there a supreme intelligence? So all these things were rattling around in my brain. And I remember quite distinctly, I was riding in a car, and I was going from one place that I thought, we're just wasting our time here. And we were going to another place where I knew we were just going to be wasting our time. And in the process of transitioning from worthless point A to worthless point B, we were talking nonsense, worthless scratch in the meantime. I thought, what is the meaning of all this? And as I was thinking that, all these things combined together, I saw that in the back seat of the car, there was a portion of a book. It wasn't even the full book, it was just a portion. And I thought, I might as well read something while I'm going from foolishness to foolishness. I might as well read something. So when I looked at it, I reached back, and it turned out to be Prabhupada's Gita, the 6th chapter, the Macmillan Gita. And I began reading it, and it was just like those movies, when you turn a page and the dong of time, go. All the different questions that I had were one by one being answered. And I thought, as I think it's Emerson or Thoreau says, it was as if a voice of the timeless ages was speaking to us. So I remember thinking that, I've read one chapter of this book, and I've learned more in this one chapter than I've read in volumes of books. Than I've learned in volumes of books. So, and I saw Bhagavad Gita, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami. So I went the next day and I got Prabhupada's Gita. And I loved it. It was just, this was it. I just knew that this was it. But I didn't make the connection because the devotees had just come down to Laguna Beach. And I would see them chanting sometimes. And it was the hippie days. So first I thought they were hippies on LSD. I thought they were with, this. And then I figured, no, they're probably some kind of monks. And I thought they were Buddhist monks. But I was a theist. I was reading Bhagavad Gita. And I thought these were nihilistic Buddhists. So I used to cross the street to avoid the devotees, I thought they were, I was obviously too sinful to associate with them. So I used to cross the street. So one day, my older brother said to me, let's go to the Hare Krishna temple. I said, no. I said, that's those Buddhists that are singing for their supper on the corner. Why do I want to go hear from them? He said, no. They have a very nice this and that. And he said, and they'll also have a vegetarian feast. And I was a vegetarian. So I thought, well, okay, at least I'll get a free meal out of it. I said, I can listen to anything for an hour, and it'll be good sociological study. I'll go there and see what they're saying and just, check it out. So I went. And it was completely wild in those days. The devotee, if you were a devotee, if you'd been a devotee 1 or 2 years, you were a senior devotee. If you were 28, 29, 30 years old and had been a devotee, if you had first and second initiation, which you could get after a year and a half, you were like Bhishma Dev, So the devotee giving the lecture was a little spaced out, and I couldn't understand what he was saying. And I hadn't made the connection between the Gita and the devotees yet, so I didn't know what was going on. And then on the altar, there was no picture of no deities, no Radha Krishna, but what there was no Balaram, no Jagannath, no Subhadra, only Lord Balaram. There was Lord Balaram on the altar with no clothes. And coming from the West, and now by the grace of Lord Balaram, Jagannath Swami Nayana Patagami. But I thought, is this the Easter Islands? With some carved statue, in the West, we don't know any of these. What's going on here? And then the far out part, so I was trying to figure out Lord Jagannath. The devotee's lecture was he blooped about 6 weeks later, so his lecture was all over the place. And then the devotee, so when they started the arti, in front of Lord Balaram, standing on the altar, there was about maybe 50 people, small temple. There was a bunch of hippies, long-haired hippies. They all started to take their clothes off. I thought, whoa, is this some kind of nudist club or something? I said, I'm out of here, this is not for me. And then I saw who later on I found out was the temple president, came over and stopped them. I said, no, you don't do that. So anyway, turns out that the devotee in the lecture had said, surrender everything to Krishna. So these hippies thought that they were surrendering everything. If they were standing naked before God, they'd surrendered everything. So the temple president convinced them to put their clothing back on. So this was my first Sunday feast. And as I was walking out the door, I didn't know what the devotee had said. I couldn't figure out Lord Balaram. I wasn't sure if they were really into being half naked. And I didn't know, but the prasadam was good. I remember there was a nice feast, a very nice prasadam. I can remember samosas, simply wonderful, nice pushpan rice, halava. You get these things all the time. But for us, picture a man in the desert, and finally he comes to an oasis and he's drinking cold, soothing water, So it was. I remember the prasad was very nice. But as I was walking out the door, I saw Prabhupada's Gita on the book table. So I asked the devotees, I said, do you teach from this book sometimes? And he said, no, this is the cornerstone of our philosophy, Bhagavad Gita. And this is by our founder, Acharya, Srila Prabhupada. And I said, I'm saving my money. I'm going to India. I want to become his student. I thought Prabhupada was in the Himalayas somewhere, and I would just somehow or other, by the arrangement of the Lord, find him, So this was my plan, to come to India. They said, no, you don't have to go to India. They said, he's in Los Angeles on a writing retreat. Prabhupada was writing Nectar Devotion and Krishna book at the same time. So they said, he gives the Sunday feast lecture. So I said, fantastic. But the devotee said, we don't have a car. I said, well, I have a car. I told you. So the next Sunday, we drove up to Los Angeles, and the devotees told me, they said, Prabhupada is like a swan. So I was thinking, swan, does he have a long neck? Because we don't know hangsa, we didn't know these analogies in the West. So I was thinking, what does he mean, swan? And then I thought, must mean graceful. So I remember the first time I saw Prabhupada, he sat down, he picked up a glass, and he drank like this, And you see this in India, but even the way Prabhupada moved, you don't see. It was like a ballerina. Every movement was completely graceful. Prabhupada was completely conscious. I could understand that here is someone whose all of their senses are completely tuned in. Prabhupada was completely present, His mind wasn't in 50 different places or Here was someone who was completely fixed, both fully present and timeless. I could understand that just by the way Prabhupada so gracefully drank water and put it down, So then Prabhupada gave the lecture, and again, I didn't bow down when I first came. I thought, I have some faith, but how do I know the books? Some people speak nicely, Haridas Thakur says. No, is it Chaitanya Mahaprabhu says about Haridas Thakur? Some people speak nicely, but don't act so nicely. And some people act nicely, but don't speak so nicely. But you both speak nicely and act nicely in Chaitanya Charitamrita. So I was thinking he speaks nicely, but let him prove himself, I'm so arrogant. I was thinking like that. And I remember, so I didn't bow down. And I remember Prabhupada about halfway into the lecture, he said, it is all right if you don't bow down. He said, you can bow down out of love, you can bow down out of knowledge, you can bow down out of intelligence, or you can have your head pushed down at the time of death. Either way, you must bow down. So that was quite convincing. I was impressed by that. So a professor from Caltech came, and evidently, like Prakasananda Saraswati in the Chaitanya Leela, evidently some of his students had come and met Prabhupada and been impressed and come back and told their professor. And their professor was saying, this bhakti is sentimental and this and that. So this top Sanskrit professor from Caltech, Eastern philosophies, came and he challenged Srila Prabhupada. Prabhupada gave the lecture and asked for questions. And the man said, evidently, not evidently because I was there, but he said, that this bhakti is sentiment and, it's all beyond words and, if you really want to study Vedanta, the whole line, right? And Shankaracharya says this, that. Prabhupada didn't even look at him. Prabhupada was just chanting japa with that royal, noble profile, just looking at we had small deities, he was just chanting japa. And the man went on for about 5-10 minutes. And then Prabhupada said, "Are you finished?" And the man said, "Yes, Swamiji." And Prabhupada just, like picture a nail and hammering a nail in, Prabhupada hit him with, and he was complaining about the Bhagavatam. It's not really, it's one of the histories. It's not really one of the Vedas. Prabhupada said, this Upanishad, this, Vedanta Sutra, this, that. And Prabhupada just hammered him. It was so heavy, like the man was, and the man's main complaint was his chanting with sentimentality. Prabhupada hit him so hard with this sloka and that sloka and this, Madhvacharya says, and Ramanujacharya says, and Chaitanya Mahaprabhu says, that the guy was standing very arrogantly. Then after a while he was kind of sloping. Then he was actually on his knees. Then he was sitting, and if he could have melted into the floor, he would have melted into the floor. Prabhupada was so powerful. And then at the end, to the credit of the professor, proof that he'd been defeated, the man said, so Prabhupada said, "So what do you say, sir?" And the man said, "Swamiji, can we have kirtan?" In other words, he got the point. He actually realized that Prabhupada had convinced him, So I was so impressed by that, There was another time, because I started coming regularly, and Prabhupada went to a radio show, and we were listening to the radio show, and they asked, "Swamiji, why is the death rate so high in India?" Prabhupada said, "The death rate is the same everywhere, 100%. So I was impressed by that. Then they asked Prabhupada, "Is the world flat? It says in your Vedic understanding the world is flat." Actually, the word, like Bhartvarsa, or Bhumi, it can mean it can mean Bhartvarsa, the continent, subcontinent of India. It can mean the round planet. It can also mean our planetary system. And the plane of the planetary system is flat. So when it says it's flat, that reference is when it's using Bhartvarsa or Bhumandala in the sense of that plane. So it's actually correct, but they misunderstand. So they say, "Well, you say the world is flat." Prabhupada said to the man, "Everywhere I walk it is." Which, and then the guy didn't know what to say. Then there was a lady who was his assistant in this radio. We're all listening. We're listening on the radio as Prabhupada was saying this. Then the lady says, "Why do you shave your head?" Prabhupada said, "Why do you shave your legs?" So there's this long pause. Prabhupada said, "Better to have warm leg and cool brain. You need a cool brain to understand spiritual life." The man became so frustrated. He said, "What if everyone became Krishna conscious? Like the whole world will stop, Prabhupada said, "Don't worry, there'll always be fools like you who won't." I mean, it was so, and then when Prabhupada came back to the temple, we were all like seeing that the general returns from the field from victory, And Prabhupada said, "I can say these things, you cannot." He said, "This is the special dispensation for old ladies, old men and little children. Old men and little children, they can go anywhere and they can say anything." But one of the things one of the devotees told me, because I was a golden boy kissed by the gods, as they say. I mean, I had a wealthy family, I had a good education, I had everything I needed. So one of the devotees, so I was a little arrogant. Actually, I was quite arrogant. I mean, even more, I'm not as arrogant as I was by Krishna's grace. Well, Prabhupada said, so one of the devotees told me, because I was saying, "You guys are pessimistic, what about the joy in life?" And and the devotee said, "There's one problem." I said, "What's that?" "One problem with this world." And they said, "No one gets out of here alive. No one gets out of here at Martya Loka." So I remember that really had an impact on me. So I saw a Back to Godhead, and this is the last thing I'll say. I saw a Back to Godhead magazine as I was coming to the temple. It had a picture of all the different philosophers. It had Socrates, it had, Goethe, it had it had Timothy Leary, it had all the, pantheon of voices that we listened to. And in the middle, it had all them, they were Bob Dylan, they were all in black and white, and there was a picture of Prabhupada in color. And it said, "All these men know the problems. Only this man, Prabhupada, knows the answers." And it struck me. It's true. You can chronicle all the problems and you can moan and groan and complain, but what's the solution? What is, the story of the Gordian knot? That when Alexander the Great came through the Himalayas of the Hindu Kush, he was blocked by one army and they said, "You have to answer this riddle. You have to untie this knot. And if you can't untie this knot, then I'm going to kill you." And there was a whole stack of bodies that had failed. So Alexander the Great, what did he do? With one swipe of his sword, he cut the knot and the whole knot unraveled. So what is that? Well, there's so many problems. Well, what is the Gordian knot? What is the sword that cuts through that? It's the sword of knowledge, as Krishna says in Bhagavad Gita. So I became convinced that the best thing I could do with my life is to serve Srila Prabhupada by spreading his message. That rather than becoming another doctor or a lawyer or, have a nice house, Om Jaya Jagadish, by the sea. God give us his daily bread, whatever it may be. The best thing I can do is become a servant of Srila Prabhupada and spread his message. So that's why I decided to become a devotee and moved into the temple. Hare Krishna.
It's impetus. If there is an alternative, which all great saints, sages say, all Shastra says, even, and I don't want to go too far afield, but that there's a kingdom of God, there's a spiritual world where we're eternal. There's no birth, death, disease, and old age. Then excuse my French, what the hell am I doing here? What's the logical question? If there's a spiritual world, Prabhupada said, you can hear the recording. I heard him say it. In the spiritual world, the rice will tell you when it's done. And if you're busy doing something else, the garlands will string themselves. Prabhupada said, I heard it. It can be daytime and nighttime simultaneously in the spiritual world.